As a child, I remember the Menendez case as a cautionary tale of greed. You don't want to be like those Menendez brothers, children that murdered their parents out of waiting for some inheritance and making allegations of horrific sexual abuse after their deaths. That was the cautionary tale of the Menendez brothers. Greed. This was the narrative that was painted when I was growing up and listening to the media. I was a little girl then, 5 or 6 years old. So obviously I didn't follow the case much when it was going on. Then you had the media that would trivialize the allegations of abuse that came about during the Menendez trial. The allegations became the butt of every joke.
It's not about that. Get over it. And let's face it, Kitty and Jose had to go. Here's the deal. You stick a toothbrush up your 6-year-old kid's ass, he gets to blow you away in the family room. That's the rule. Leslie Abramson, go on, girl. You're doing a great job. And all right, I know they don't exactly have an airtight case, okay? Lyle went on a little bit of a spending spree week after the murders. He got a couple Rolexes and a $70,000 Porsche. But you know what? Sometimes you just have to treat yourself. You do. It makes yourself feel better. Like one time I went to the mall and I got a whole bunch of caramel corn just because I felt like it. And the other thing is, Lyle is my boyfriend. He just doesn't know it yet.
This was the 90s. Did people really take child abuse allegations serious? But then again, they were adults when they were making these allegations. So keep that in mind.
I know you and me are having a thing here, and I know you hate me, but I need you to be civil, at least through dinner, and then on the way home you can pull a Menendez. Deal?
You know who hung out with their parents? The Menendez Brothers.
Well, I'm not a fan of the murders, but a big fan of the sweaters.
And then this was in the 2000s. I mean, even then, people were kind of poking fun at the Menendez brothers.
Meet Lyle, who's been most everywhere, from New York town to Old Bel Air.
But Eric's not as fancy-free, he spent his time in therapy. What a dangerous pair, but they're brothers. They're murdering brothers, filled with hate.
Well, you can't forget Jay Leno, right? He had a lot of punchlines for the Menendez brothers. He certainly did.
So I can definitely understand why coming out and telling people that you were being sexually abused would have been something that people don't talk about, especially in the Latino community. I mean, no. In the Latino community, there was no way that Jose Menendez, this prosperous Latino RCA executive who left Cuba, graduated from a university, and then met his wife, Kitty Menendez, and then became a successful CPA businessman, would have subjected his boys to this horrific abuse. I mean, that's just no way. There's no way. And allegedly, Kitty, his wife, the mother of Lyle and Erik Menendez, knew about the abuse and remained quiet. I mean, they had their marital problems, the cheating, alleged mistresses, but was Jose Menendez abusing his own boys?
To be fair, the Menendez brothers did kill their parents.
It's August 21st, 1989. We're at 722 North Elm Drive. Reported double homicide. Present at the scene are Detectives Zoller, myself, and Lenahan.
Lyle, now 55, and Erik, 52, were convicted of first-degree murder in 1996 for the murder of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez. The brothers shot them to death at their Beverly Hills mansion on August 20th, 1989. Allegedly, the motive, based on what the prosecutor presented, it was so they can inherit their parents' $14 million estate. However, the defense is claiming and has claimed that the brothers claimed the killings were an imperfect self-defense after a lifetime of physical and sexual abuse from their parents. Their first trial resulted in a hung jury. The allegations of abuse were restricted in the second trial, and prosecutors insisted that abuse claims were a lie. The brothers were convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Now, the attorneys for the brothers are pointing out new evidence, new pieces of evidence that confirm of sexual abuse by the father. One of those pieces of evidence is a newly discovered letter Erik wrote just 8 months before the murder. And an additional piece of new evidence we'll be discussing here soon.
Listen to how Nancy Grace describes the crime scene and all the details.
On the phone was the older brother, 21-year-old Lyle, screaming 3 times. Lyle calls out for his younger brother, Erik, and you can hear Erik in the background crying and screaming about his parents dead. I will never forget the description of the crime scene. The father, Jose, was found sitting up like a mannequin. There at Jose's feet was his wife, Kitty, the former beauty queen. She was curled up in a fetal position. While Erik Menendez was speaking to his shrink, he confesses that he murdered his parents along with his older brother, Lyle. They said they hated their father, they hated living in the home, and they wanted to rescue their mother from their father's infidelities. We learned that the brothers state to Dr. Oziel on tape that the father, Jose Menendez, died very quickly. But the mother, their mother, Kitty, did not. She was moaning and crying and was trying to crawl away from her own sons as they murdered her. And what did they do? The two brothers, Erik and Lyle Menendez, walk outside to the front porch, reload, and come back in and finish off the murder of their own mother. The Menendez double murder trial was one of the first to become famous for humanizing the defendants in such a way.
The Menendez brothers are guilty of killing their parents. You can't take that away.
Now, these allegations of sexual abuse by Jose Menendez as to the reason why Lyle and Erik Menendez killed their mother and their father, these are not new. Clearly, it was some of the motive that was presented by the defense during the trial. It's not new. But what is interesting now, 30 plus years after the crime, after they've served so many years, what is interesting now is the sexual abuse allegations are being brought up again, and they're being substantiated by a former Menudo boy band member.
Menudo had just signed with RCA Records, where Menendez was a top executive.
We now have evidence that makes absolutely clear that those boys were molested. And if those boys were molested, it would have been manslaughter, and they would be out.
The judge in this case, if he finds that the new evidence is credible and the conviction should be vacated, do you think the DA's office would seek a new trial?
I think they would spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Will any of these allegations help with Lyle and Erik Menendez's release from prison? Jose Menendez is connected to Menudo through RCA. Menudo, the Puerto Rican teen pop group and called the Hispanic Beatles, was founded by Edgardo Diaz. The group was formed in 1977 by the Puerto Rican manager-producer Edgardo Diaz, who cleverly built into its concept the principle of internal youth. When one of the Menudo members' voices changed or became too grown up, he is replaced. That makes Menudo theoretically at least an age-proof musical institutional group with pop appeal to generations after generations of youngsters between the ages of 7 and 15. When I think of Menudo, I think of Ricky Martin.
Ladies and gentlemen, Menudo!
Talk to you because you are the cutest thing I have seen. Now, when you first knew that you were going to be picked to be in this group, what did you do to go home and celebrate?
Well, I first told all my parents, to all my family.
Yes.
And then
listen, don't purr back there. We got to hear it. All your family.
And then we do a disco party.
You went to a disco party after that. Who has a...
Although there were many members of Menudo, Ricky Martin was probably the one that had the most success out of the group. Now let's go back a little bit. Jose Menendez is connected to Menudo through RCA. In November of 1983, before I was born, Menudo signed a long-term contract with RCA Records. It called for 12 albums in 6 years. It was comparable to the company's multi-million-dollar agreements with Kenny Rogers and Diana Ross. Edgardo Diaz, the founder of Menudo, signed this contract with Jose Menendez at the expense of another member of the group. His name, Roy Rossello.
Former Menudo singer Roy Rossello claims he was drugged and raped by Jose Menendez in the mid-'80s. Menudo had just signed with RCA Records, where Menendez was a top executive.
In May of 2023, Erik and Lyle Menendez have two pieces of evidence backing their claims that their father was molesting them. According to their attorney, this comes in the wake of an explosive new documentary aired on Peacock called Menendez plus Menudo, Boys Betrayed. In this documentary, Roy Rossello makes allegations of years of sexual abuse by Edgardo Diaz. The details of that are very triggering, and I would suggest you guys watch the docuseries if you want to understand what Roy Rossello endured at the hands of Edgardo Diaz during his time with Menudo. The LAPD is investigating the founder of Menudo for alleged sexual assault on former members. There's a current investigation on Edgardo Diaz through the LAPD. We have yet to receive any updates from the LAPD as how they plan to move forward with their investigation. In the documentary, former Menudo member Roy Rossello claims band's manager Edgardo Diaz introduced him to Jose Menendez in New York. The declaration that was submitted by Roy reads, I was born May 1st of 1969 in Puerto Rico. In 1983, I joined the Puerto Rican singing group Menudo. Menudo was a boy band formed by Edgardo Diaz in the late 1970s. I was in the group until 1986. In the fall of 1983 or 1984, the group was performing in New York. I recall that this was shortly before the time that Edgardo Diaz signed a record contract with RCA for the group. One evening at the hotel, Mr. Diaz told me that I would be having dinner with Jose Menendez, who was an RCA executive. Diaz said that I was going to do a favor and do something great for Menudo and for him. I was taken in a limousine to Jose Menendez's house. As I recall, it was in New Jersey. Jose Menendez was in the limousine, as was Edgardo Diaz. After arriving at the Menendez home, I saw one of his boys sitting behind the front door. I was directed to the dining room. Another boy was at the dining room table. Neither of the boys said anything to me. Jose Menendez was there along with his wife, as was Edgardo Diaz. Jose Menendez offered me a glass of wine at the table and told me it was expensive wine, so I should drink the entire glass. I felt sick after drinking it. Things looked blurry and I felt like I could not move. I was partially pushed and partially carried down a hallway. It felt like I had no control over my body. Jose took me to a room. He closed the door. I could not move my body. He put me into a bed. I felt him take off my pants and felt him. I think I told him I did not want to do this. I recalled being carried back to the limousine. Later, I woke up in the hotel where the group was staying. I was in pain for weeks. The pain was unbearable. Edgardo Diaz said I would be better soon, and this was normal. I accused Diaz of selling my body to Jose Menendez. He told me not to mention this to anyone. This was not my only sexual experience with Jose Menendez. I recall a time Menudo was performing in New York. I think we were at Radio City Music Hall. Before the show, Edgardo Diaz told me to meet Jose Menendez in the bathroom for oral sex. When I went to the bathroom, fans were already in the audience screaming. I recall Jose Menendez telling me that the fans were screaming because he had made the group famous. Jose Menendez then orally, after that show, Edgardo Diaz said he had a last favor to ask. He asked me to go with Jose Menendez to a hotel. I went with Jose Menendez in a limousine to a hotel. It was not the hotel the group was staying at. I do not recall the name of the hotel, but I do recall that it was old fashioned. Jose Menendez took me to a room and told me he was going so it did not hurt. He put me on the bed. He took my pants off. He took me back to my hotel afterwards. He opened the door to the limousine and said goodbye. I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct. This is just one piece of evidence, Roy Rossello's statement. There's also a letter that was written by 8 months before the murders of Jose and Kitty Menendez that is also being under consideration as well. There hasn't been any updates as far as where this is going to go with this new evidence. I believe the Menendez brothers' attorneys is still waiting to hear back. I want to bring out another point that is very important. Roy Rossello was not the first person to come out and accuse Edgardo Diaz of sexual abuse and sexual assault. There were other members prior to Roy that came out, one of which was notably in 1991 on the show Cristina, a very well-known show in the Latino community. Some of us grew up watching that show. That show is no longer airing. but it was a moment in which several members came out and alleged the sexual abuse against Edgardo. A member that's been notably quiet throughout this whole thing and has yet to speak out on anything has been Ricky Martin. People have asked the question, why hasn't Ricky Martin spoken out? What is going on with Ricky Martin? Because so many members have spoken out against Edgardo's abuse and other things that have happened when Menudo was around. I think the sad part of this whole situation is that it was through Roy Rossello's abuse that the RCA contract was signed, right? Ricky Martin was about 12 when he entered Menudo, very young as well. And there's been some allegations against Ricky Martin by his own family members, and nothing was founded or substantiated for that. But the members that have been in Menudo witness a lot of things, and they've spoken out to various channels, especially on YouTube. There's a channel here by the name of Chisme No Like. It's a very popular Latino channel that everybody tends to tune into for a lot of Menudo news. And in this channel, there's been a lot of allegations that have been put out there regarding Ricky Martin.
No, mira, es una actividad. Edgardo era radicalmente o generalmente era activo. ¿Qué significa activo? Es el hombre que le gusta en la actividad con otro hombre ser el macho alfa o el
macho alfa, ya.
El macho alfa. Ya. ¿No? ¿Entendió? Pero a Edgardo también, cuando se le antojaba, le gustaba también recibir, ser pasivo. Vamos a manejarlo entre activo y pasivo.
Que es como se llama la situación en una relación así.
Y fíjense, no lo decimos nosotros, no nos confunda. No estamos cambiando el género. Pero la jerga de Menudo, ellos hablan entre ellos diciendo, este era nena y este era nene.
Porque la jerga quiere decir entre como ellos vacilaban entre ellos.
Entre ellos. Ricky Martin.
¿Te refieres a los niños?
A los Menudos,
Okay.
Unos tenían 14, otros 12, otros 17 y otros 19.
The subtitles are there if you're wanting, a more direct translation, but what these two commentators from Chisme No Like, they're saying is Edgardo Diaz was very radical, was very sexually radical, and they would use jargon of like who's a boy and who's a girl and who's receiving when these sexual activities were happening. And Ricky Martin is made mention because various band members witness some of the abuse on Ricky Martin.
Ese viaje. Ahí. Los japoneses no tenían idea que estaban premiando a un niño que estaba siendo víctima de una de las atrocidades más grandes que puede cometer un ser humano con un niño. Y ahí están, de blanco, con toda la pureza, con toda la inocencia, esa almita de Ricky Martin a los 11 años, no lo que soy, porque lamentablemente su silencio también lo ha transformado en un tipo anestesiado por todo esto que le pasó. Legadamente, cuando Ricky estaba en Japón después del premio, en el hotel, tenía 11 años de edad. Muchos Menudos lo saben. Ricky habría perdido su virginidad con el camarógrafo Edwin, que Edgardo Diaz tenía contratado. Fue el camarógrafo que estaba 24 horas con él, con Edgardo Diaz, quien habría abusado de Ricky Martin en Japón cuando tenía 11 años. Este ex camarógrafo está libre y suelto y testigo de Jehová. Entiendo que se pueda arrepentir y Dios perdona todo, pero hay cosas que son imperdonables. Ese señor está en una iglesia que puede tener a cargo niños de la iglesia, adolescentes de la iglesia, y en la iglesia también entra el diablo. Señores, dejémonos de joder. El camarógrafo que Edgardo Diaz tenía contratado 24 horas, que dormía con ellos, iba con ellos, habría sido quien supuesta y alegadamente habría molestado por primera vez en la agrupación al pobre niño Ricky Martin. Y él habría cambiado su cuerpito para siempre por esa violación, esa molestación de un camarógrafo de Edgardo Diaz. Edgardo Diaz tiene que ir a la cárcel, Edgardo Diaz tiene que ser atrapado en Europa y tiene que ser atrapado también Edwin, el camarógrafo. Y esto, señores, es muy serio, claro que es muy serio y es muy grave. Y yo le pido a Ricky Martin, en este momento, le pido que rompa el silencio y que realmente, si él perdonó al camarógrafo, si él perdonó a Edgardo Díaz, pero por el bien de todos los niños del mundo, Ricky, representás a UNICEF y a un montón de...
I mean, these allegations are pretty big that this channel has made. They had said that Ricky Martin had allegedly went to a trip to Japan, and they have footage of this trip in 1985 where he went to Japan and he had lost his virginity. You know, Ricky Martin, again, has never outwardly spoken about this. If anything, he has remained silent and hasn't really made any allegations. Even when the allegations against Edgardo were made, he has remained silent, never has said anything about anybody. However, there's been a lot of witnesses and a lot of allegations. Some people feel like, you know, he benefited from his silence. He has benefited from being silent because he's been able to, he was supported by Edgardo, which here's a recent, this is a picture of them a couple years ago.
I want to know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments. Do you guys feel like the Menendez brothers deserve a new look into their case based on these allegations? I want to know kind of your thoughts on that matter. What do you guys think about the Menudo allegations and just everything that's surrounding that scandal? Why do you think Ricky Martin hasn't spoken out? I mean, do y'all think that maybe he wasn't a victim of everything else that everybody's been saying? I'd like to know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments. Can you guys do me a favor? Please subscribe, hit the like, and share if you enjoy my content. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Rabbits out. Bye, guys.